The Empire are about as close to a historical faction as Warhammer gets. They're a faction comprised of regular humans with regular human struggles, such as general elections and chaotic invasions from the north. This has made them one of the most popular factions in the game since day one, and even for someone who enjoys the variety as much as me, I have to admit, they can be a lot more fun than their theming suggests. Let's first go over the pros and cons of the campaign gameplay. First of all, the pros. As a proud member of the Ordertide, they are an extremely strong diplomatic faction and can make alliances and trade pacts aplenty for tons of cash and emotional support from your friends. There are also a massive number of other Empire factions all over the map, all ripe for the Confederation, especially if you're playing as a faction with the elect accounts mechanic. And finally, with the trade, massive amounts of land, and huge number of income buildings, you can be one remarkably rich faction. As for the cons, the factions dealing with the elect account system can be heavily penalised for failing to stay on top of it, making it a massive challenge to get back into the game. Depending on your starting location, Marcus, all of your potential best friends can be very far away, leaving you all alone for the first few turns against what can sometimes feel like insurmountable odds. And on the whole, they have a fairly limited climate preference, making expanding out of your home into a lot more of a hassle than it needs to be. Let's now go through the different factions. First up, we have Reikland, and this is led by Emperor Karl Franz. For their faction effects, they are granted 10 relations with other Empire factions, +2 to all Lord recruit rank, and +10% to campaign move range for all armies. For Karl's army, he gains 25% upkeep reduction for Reiksguard and Greatswords, as well as 8 leadership for all units. His faction starts in Altdorf, and his starting army has Greatswords, Halberdiers, 2 units of Swordsmen, 2 units of handgunners, some Reiksguard, and some mortars. For his climate preferences, temperate, savanna, desert, and jungle are suitable, magical forest, mountains, ocean, and temperate island are unpleasant, and frozen, wasteland, and chaotic wasteland are uninhabitable. To get the short victory as Karl, you need to destroy the Empire Secessionists, the Barrow Legion, and Sylvania, as well as occupy, loot, raise, or sack 30 different settlements. Of course, the starting war against the Secessionists will secure you your starting and most powerful province and wipe them out. After this, you want to make connections with as many of the other Empire factions as you can as you build up a big army and move your way east towards Vlad or south towards Heinrich. Vlad will likely have more lands but be more spread out, so easy to pick apart, whereas Heinrich will be in one settlement but have a full army, so be a lot harder to take out. Once both are taken care of, work on uniting the Empire, and you should have most, if not all of those settlements by the time you are done. Next up, we have the Golden Order, and they are led by Balthazar Gelt. For his faction effects, he gains 2 hero capacity and -50% upkeep for all battle wizard heroes, and 10 armor for all units in all armies. For Balthazar's army, he gains +2 to the hero recruit rank for local battle wizards, -20% to the Winds of Magic cost for the Law of Metal, and +10% to missile strength for artillery units. His faction starts in Fyldorf, and he also owns Fort Sol. His starting army has great swords, 3 swordsmen, spearmen, 2 crossbowmen, outriders, cannons, and mortars, and he also starts with an Empire Captain hero. For his climate preferences, mountain moves into suitable, and magical forest moves into uninhabitable. To get the short victory as Balth, you need to destroy Sylvania, as well as occupy, loot, raise, or sack 30 different settlements. Since you only have the one goal of taking out Sylvania, you just need to get the best army you can and take the fight to them. Finish off that starting war, then work on building relations with the other Empire factions to get the confederations in the works. Not really much to this one, just build up relations and an army, then take out Vlad and unite the Empire to get those settlements. Our next faction is a bit of a different one, the Huntsmarshal's expedition, and they are led by Marcus Wolfhart. His faction can only recruit from a limited pool of units. The rest of the roster can be recruited from Empire reinforcements that arrive every few turns. The quality of these supplies can be increased via the acclaim mechanic, and acclaim is gained by progressing the campaign by taking settlements, building ports, and unlocking legendary hunter heroes. These are 4 unique heroes with their own quest chains that unlock and upgrade them. The higher your level of acclaim is, the better units will be in the supplies, at the cost of worse relations with the lizardmen, who already hate you, so it doesn't really make a difference. Expanding will cause all nearby factions to take a disliking to you and empower their armies via the hostility mechanic. This will pretty much always be increasing as you move through the map and expand your empire. And the higher it gets, the more powerful enemies become, and the more your settlements are harder to control, but the rate of Imperial supplies increases. On top of this, this faction also gains +3 to recruit rank for all Huntsman generals, and -40 relations with all Lizardmen factions. For Marcus's army, he gains -50% upkeep for archers and Huntsman units, +50% ambush success and defense chance, and grants the Woodsman attribute for all units in his army. His faction starts in the Temple of Kara, and his starting army has Halberdiers, 2 swordsmen, 3 spearmen, 2 huntsmen, 2 archers, and some war wagons. As for his climate preferences, temperate island, savanna and jungle are suitable, frozen, magical forest, mountains and temperate are unpleasant, and wasteland, ocean, chaotic wasteland and deserts are uninhabitable. For his victory conditions, you need to have 100 acclaim, destroy Hexawatl, Itza, Clan Pestilence, the Awakened, and the Dreadfleet, and occupy, loot, raise or sack 30 different settlements. Marcus has the hardest campaign and the hardest victory conditions for any of the Empire factions. Your best bet would be expand a little bit at first and get your heroes on the go, then move north to take out Hexawatl first, and then you can focus all your attention on the south. Once they're taken care of, Itza make a good next target, as you can go straight down the middle of Lustria and into Clan Pestilence right after. Once they're both taken care of, you can turn your attention to securing the eastern coastline, taking out Luther in the process, before sending your best army or two to take on Noctilus at the Galleon's graveyard, since he hardly ever expands beyond there. And our final faction is the Cult of Sigmar, and they are led by Volkmar the Grim. Volkmar is able to collect and seal away the Books of Nagash, and will receive bonuses for everyone he collects. He unlocks ancillaries, elect count state troop units, upkeep reductions for these units, and even ward save for all characters in his faction. He also gains specific bonuses for each book he seals, and each one is unique to that book. His faction also gains +4 recruit rank for witch hunters and warrior priests, 8 bonus versus infantry for flagellants, empire knights and free company militia, and a 33% cooldown reduction to battle prayers and the accusation ability. Volkmar's army spreads 4 control wherever they go, and grants 10% physical resistance and 8 melee defense for flagellants, empire knights and free company militia. His faction starts in Suddenburg, and his starting army has great swords, 2 flagellants, halberdiers, swordsmen, handgunners, crossbowmen, empire knights, and mortars, and his faction also starts with a witch hunter hero. For his climate preferences, wasteland, temperate, savanna, desert, and jungle are suitable, magical forest, mountains, ocean, and temperate island are unpleasant, and frozen and chaotic wasteland are uninhabitable. To get the short victory as Volkmar, you need to destroy the Oracles of Tzeentch and the Drakenhof Conclave, as well as occupy, loot, raise or sack 30 different settlements. Pursuing your starting war will net you some land and bring you close to Manfred, cutting off his growth in the process. Once you have a powerful enough army, you can take him on and take him out pretty early on in the campaign. The Oracles of Tzeentch are far to the south, so once Manfred is taken care of, you can take your time slowly expanding southwards, gathering more land and resources as you go. This will give you plenty of cash to build up powerful armies to take them out once you get there with relative ease. Once both are gone, you can simply expand wherever you please, probably towards the Books of Nagash to get those settlement requirements and some nice effects. We now come to the faction mechanics. First up, we have Imperial Authority and Prestige. These are both currencies exclusive to the Empire and are only used by Karl and Gelt. Fun fact, the Empire are one of those factions that doesn't really have mechanics that are used by every single legendary lord. But this is the one that is used by the most of them, so I'm going to explain this one here. Prestige is earned by winning battles, owning settlements, certain buildings, and events involving this mechanic. It is then spent on electoral machinations, which is essentially relation manipulation, and these events. Authority can be earned by placing elect counts back in their rightful place, gifting them lost settlements, missions, preventing civil wars, and events. It is then spent on confederation, and is lost when you attack other elect counts, destroy them, raise empire settlements, and more events. Your faction also receives buffs and debuffs for its level of authority, and dropping below 10 will cause all counts to declare war on you, which is pretty disastrous to say the least. These events I've mentioned so much occur pretty often in the campaign and are dilemmas often involving one or more elect count factions. Sometimes one of them is being attacked and you need to choose your level of involvement. Sometimes 2 counts are about to go to war or are both claiming ownership of a settlement. Your decisions during these events will affect your prestige and authority as well as fealty with each of the other counts. This is the second part of the mechanic called the elect counts, though it is all pretty much part of the same system. Every elect count has a level of fealty to the player's faction, and the higher this level, the more likely they are to offer confederation, allowing you to totally unite the Empire. If this drops to 0, the counts will attempt to secede from the Empire and even need to be bought with prestige and authority, or have war declared on them, which rarely goes down well with anybody. Once you take control of an elect count capital, you can grant one of your lords a position as count, which grants special effects, weapons, and state troop units. You ideally want to take control of all of the states you can, but via the correct methods to avoid being penalised. If you do this, you'll have a ton of powerful buffs to your lords and the faction on the whole. We now come to the lord skills. First up, we have Emperor Karl Franz. We're going to start on the blue line going Route Marcher, Leaders of Renown for recruitment cost reduction, and Reassuring Presence for less attrition. Then Irrepressible, Logistician for replenishment, Lightning Strike, and finally Headhunter for all sorts of good stuff. The best of the Empire line has powerful effects for a bunch of units in the army, so is well worth getting. The Inspiring Presence line is great for unit buffs for your endgame units, so whatever you plan on using, grab those skills. The top row has buffs for his leadership aura, unit upkeep, and missile resist, so all worth picking up as and when you need them. And finally, the Hard to Hit line is great for general combat buffs to Karl himself, so it's nice to pick up at the end. Next up we have Balthazar Gelt, and of course the most important skills for any spellcaster are their spells, and Balth is no different. Grab pretty much all of his spell skills since they are pretty powerful and he is the supreme metalcaster, so you may as well make the most of it. Afterwards, we can go into his unique golden face mask line for various buffs to himself, his army, and the faction as a whole. Finally, we can now head into the blue tree and go for all the same choices as Carl, so I won't go over it again. From this point, we're pretty much going to follow Carl on everything, so Inspiring Presence for endgame unit buffs, and the top row for various buffs to leadership, resistance, and magic. No fighting line here, so if you have any skill points left at the end, the blue line has plenty of other choices that can help the army a huge amount. Next we have Marcus Wolfhart, and we're going to start out the same as Carl in the blue line, grabbing mostly the same but swapping Reassuring Presence for Iron Disciplinarian to make his control issues a little bit easier to manage. After this, he can go on to his best of the best line for all sorts of buffs to himself and ranged units in the army. He also has his Focus Shot line, which increases his missile damage significantly with buffs and abilities, so is well worth picking up. Then he can go into Inspiring Presence for endgame unit buffs, and it might be worth picking units specific to Marcus, since his armies tend to look a little bit different than normal due to his constraints and location. His top row has all the usual buffs and resistance, and he can finish any extra points in hard hit to make him better in melee for the rare occasions he finds himself in it. Now, our final legendary lord is Volkmar the Grim. First and foremost with Volkmar, you want to unlock all of those battle prayers to get him performing at his peak in battles. Once they're sorted, you can commence with the usual blue line we've been over a bunch by now. Then he also has his Mere Mortal Men line, which has a bunch of buffs for different units, heroes, and even the entire faction, so grab it all. Then you can head into Inspiring Presence, and again, Volkmar can run different armies to the other guys, so consider your choices a little bit before you pick. His top row has the usual buffs and resistance, then hard to hit makes him better in frontlines combat, so any points at the end can go in there. Try buffing him defensively, and he can become one of the tankiest things in the game. Now come to the generic lords, and first up we have the Archlector. Before you do anything with these guys, just like Volkmar, you want to grab those battle prayers to get them working at their peak in battles. Once you've grabbed them all, you want to go into the blue line and follow the usual skills I've been over a bunch of times by now, so I won't go over them again. After this, follow the usual Inspiring Presence for the endgame units, top row odds and ends whenever you need them, and then hard hit at the end for a more powerful battling lord. Next we have the General of the Empire. These guys have basically the same tree as the Archlectors, but with no battle prayers, so you're going to head straight into the root match tree, then Inspiring Presence, top row whenever needed, and hard hit at the end. Pick all the usual choices from these trees, and you should be just fine. And finally, we have the Huntsman General. To start off with, everything on the Circle of Protection line is great once you get later into the game, so grab those once you have the units mentioned for a ton of buffs. After this, the blue line is the same as it's always been, so grab all those to get your army some great buffs. Then the Arrow of Akshai line has some powerful buffs to their missile damage as well as some abilities, so grab those to get them contributing more in combat. The Inspiring Presence line of course buffs endgame units, so grab skills whatever you're using to make the most of it. The top row has the usual buffs and resistance, so grab those whenever you want or need them. And then finally the hard to hit line buffs their melee combat, so it's useful for making them tougher and more powerful later into the game. Now come to the heroes. First up we have the legendary heroes from Marcus Wolfhart, and first up we have Hertwig van Hal. On the campaign map he can damage walls, assassinate enemy characters, block armies, cleanse corruption, and provide scavenge when embedded in an army. Now you can build this guy as a campaign assassin or a single target killer in combat. As usual, if you want a campaign assassin, all you need is the blue line with assassinating specialist being first, followed by anything but scavenge, and you're done. For battle you can go deep into the Bloody Blade line, and I would go for missile strength and speed to allow him to use his ammo before getting stuck in combat. The top row has the powerful accusation ability, as well as more resistance, stat buffs and more, so all worth picking up whenever you can. Finally, Scavenge and Cleanse Corruption are good for extra post-battle loot and corruption clearing whilst invading foreign lands. Next we have Yorick Grim. On the campaign map he can steal technology, wound enemy characters, block armies, boost income in the local province, and increases mobility when embedded in an army. I would try to keep this guy in an army at all times, so we're going to grab increased mobility since moving armies around the map faster is great on this very thick map. The standardized firing drill line has some great buffs to himself as well as missile units in the army, so pick up basically everything here. The top row has a few odd buffs for stats, resistance, and even income, so grab all of those. And finally, you can grab boost income if you have nothing else to spend points on at the end, because who doesn't love more money? Next we have Kalara. On the campaign map, she can assault garrisons, assassinate enemy heroes, assault units, spread control in a local province, and provides training when embedded in an army. And you can either build this class as a campaign assassin or a ranged killer in combat. If you want a campaign assassin, follow the same steps as Hertwig to a T. For combat, you can grab training for free XP, then go into pretty much anything. The Eye of Kurnos line has great buffs to her missile prowess as well as that of nearby units. The Arrow of Kurnos line has more buffs for her missile power and a couple of powerful abilities, so is well worth going for. And the Sword Player line focuses on her frontlines capabilities, so if you keep finding her in melee, then grab some skills to make her more survivable and effective. Finally, the top row has more missile buffs and some resistance, so grab them whenever you want or need them. And our final legendary hero is Roderick Langeal. On the campaign map, you can assault garrisons, assassinate characters, assault units, spread control in the local province, and provides training when embedded in an army. This is yet another dude you can use as a campaign assassin or a tanky battler. If you want a campaign assassin, follow the steps as Hertwig again. For battle, he's more of a general combat hero, so we'll focus on his tankiness to keep him there for as long as possible. Grab training, then head into Blademaster, focusing on defense and armor to make him super tough, but to be honest, there's not really anything else to really spend points on, so you'll likely grab everything here before you're done. His top row has speed, resistance, and more cash, so are all great. And finally, spread control can be nice with all the issues with it that Wolfheart's faction faces. Now we come to our generic heroes. First up, we have the Warrior Priest. On the campaign map, they can damage buildings, wound enemy characters, hinder replenishment, stimulate growth in the local province, and provide replenishment when embedded in an army. These are excellent battle heroes, so I would always put them into armies. Start with Replenish Troops since it's always amazingly useful, then Safeguard for all kinds of combat buffs. And I would focus on tankiness with defense, leadership, and armor since their prayers are their real power, so keeping them there while their cooldowns run down will be very useful. The top row has their prayers, so once you get the required level, grab them as soon as you can for a ton of battle value, and you also have some melee attack and resistance, which are both great, so get both. Finally, if you have anything spare at the end, Stimulate Growth is nice for Russian province growth wherever you are. Next up, we have the Empire Captain. On the campaign map, these guys can assault garrisons, wound enemy characters, assault units, spread control, and provide training when embedded in an army. I'm honestly not the biggest fan of these guys, since they really are quite basic as far as heroes go, with no real spells or abilities to make them interesting. If I was going to take one, it would be as a tanky single entity alongside a non-combat lord. For this, you of course want to grab training for free XP for the whole army. After this, the Blademaster line is where you'll spend most of your time, and I would grab defensive buffs since they aren't ever going to be damage powerhouses. As usual, grab any top row buffs when you need or want them, then spread control at the end for any spare points. Next we have the Witch Hunters. On the campaign map, these can damage walls, assassinate enemy heroes, block armies, cleanse corruption, and provide scavenge when embedded in an army. These have pretty much the exact same skills as Hertwig, but they swap Sigmar's Will for Grim Resolve. Other than that, you can level them pretty much the exact same wherever you want them on the campaign map or in battles. And our final heroes are the Battle Wizards. On the campaign map, they can steal technology, wound enemy heroes, assault units, boost income in the local province, and provide scouting when embedded in an army. These guys can come with the Lore of Death, the Lore of Beasts, the Lore of Shadows, the Lore of Life, the Lore of Fire, the Lore of Heavens, or the Lore of Light. Of course, spellcasters are always to be used in battle, otherwise it's pretty much a waste of their talents. Grab their spells first and foremost, and you have quite the lore selection here, so pick your preferences, then go wild since you don't really have much else to spend points on. The top row has resistance, which is great once they're on a mount, and then any points can go into scouting and boost income for more items and cash. Now we come to their commandments. First up, we have the Council of the Burgermeisters. This increases growth and trade income. This is of course great for rushing growth and having on most of your settlements most of the time for the extra trade income. State Troop Levy reduces recruitment cost and increases capacity, which is of course useful when recruiting. Imperial Taxation increases income from buildings, which is great in your cash cow provinces for extra gold. Sigmarite Dogma reduces enemy hero success chance and corruption and increases the chance of intercepting armies using the underways, beast paths, or world route. This one is great for securing new corrupted provinces, as well as making it harder for enemies to move through your lands. And finally, Host Festag increases control, which is of course great for slowing a control issue while you get an actual fix sorted. And finally, we come to the research tree. The default research tree is separated into 3 sections, and 2 of these sections are divided within themselves. The first section is combat, with areas for infantry, cav, war machines and missiles. The second section is income and infrastructure and is separated into industry and engineering. And finally you have the diplomatic corps, which has buffs for relations with other Order Tide factions and buffs when fighting against all non-Order Tide factions. There's also a small section on the bottom right which changes depending on your faction. Karl and Balthazar, he has buffs to the Elect Counts mechanic. Marcus, you have buffs to the Imperial Supplies units, replenishment, control, port construction, and even more Imperial supplies. And for Volkmar, he has Flagellant and Battle Prayer buffs. Whoever I'm playing as, I like to start with a little bit of industry to help rush growth and income early on, before moving to unit buffs once I get in some later game troops, to make the most of them percentage based increases. Once I'm happy with my army and have plenty of gold to play with, I like to grab any of the cores that are useful to me at the time to help with diplomacy or wars, whichever is more pressing. The bottom right really depends on the faction, but most of the time is great at any point, so the sooner you get it, the better. And that is everything you need to know to play the Empire in campaign, and we've got the battle guide coming next Friday to run you through the entire roster as well as compositions and more, so subscribe if you want to see that. Hoping to hit 50k by the end of the year, so I sure would appreciate the assistance. Also join the Discord to vote on who the next guide should be. Voting closes in around a week, so make your choice before it's too late. If you enjoyed this video and or found it useful, then consider dropping it a like. If you really enjoy the content and are feeling especially big penis, consider supporting the channel directly by becoming a member on YouTube or a patron on the Patreon. Doing so gets you early insights into future content, increased voting power, discounts on merch, as well as shoutouts at the end of videos, just like Henry Tucker for his support at the Officer's tier. A huge thank you to all supporters. One last thank you for watching, and for now, I've been COLONELDAMNEDERS, and I will see you next turn.